Money. It's probably one of the most stressful things that people deal with, going off the default path. It dominates our brains. It focuses our attention as a sole metric of success and makes us feel like crap. How do we tackle these insecurities, these challenges? I want to offer some perspectives and an exercise to help you grapple with money. I don't have all the answers here, and I think it's a journey of trying to better understand your own relationship to money. But I hope this helps. Part of the money challenge of going off the default path is the fact that it is deeply uncertain. And wading into this uncertainty, especially at first, might cause you to overfocus on I need to monetize. However, the bigger challenge is that there is a deeper journey at play, and you want to make sure you're playing for that journey and not just the short-term fix of making money and quieting that emotion. Let's talk about money. I want to talk about 4 things. 1, how money hacks our brain. 2, how to think about what enough means, both in money and in terms of other things like time. 3, to be aware that if you want money, it can be high stakes. And 4, how can we reflect on the why behind why we are pursuing money? First, I want to just acknowledge that the modern realities mean that there is a lot of pressure on earning money. This is almost unavoidable. I'm not going to present this lecture as something that's very hippie oriented and saying, well, money shouldn't matter. I happen to really like the ideas behind some of those beliefs, but I think it's more realistic to be practical in the short term when talking about this. So why is it such high stakes? I don't have a perfect reason for this, but it does seem that people have worried about money more and more. If you look at college students since the mid-1960s, there used to be a preference for developing a meaningful philosophy of life. But as you can see over time with the green line, the pressure to be very well off financially has dramatically increased, especially in the past 15 years. It really appears that money is dominating our minds. How does our mind get so focused on one thing? Let's go back to 1944, towards the end of World War II. And at the University of Minnesota, they wanted to test what would happen if they put men under an extreme starvation diet. What they found was that people were preoccupied with food the entire time. They planned to open restaurants, to become restaurateurs. They memorized recipes. They compared food prices. That's what they were doing. When you lack something, your brain overly focuses on that one thing. However, with the emotions we tie up with earning a living and making money in today's world, it's really hard to escape this scarcity mindset, even when, if you do a practical budget, you might see that you have enough. How do we decide what's enough in today's world? With money, you have interest rates, and over time, what you have now is going to be worth less in the future. So this leads you to think that you may never have enough. And you find people with hundreds of thousands of dollars in savings feeling like they don't have any money. Lao Tzu, this is thousands of years ago, said, if you realize that you have enough, then you are truly rich. This is from a Kahneman and Deaton study in 2010 where they looked at happiness. This looks like a complicated graph. I'll let you read more. I'll link up to it if you want to explore it. But essentially what's happening here is they ask people, how did you feel the previous day? And then they classified these people based on how they were feeling. No matter their emotional state when they took the survey, what they found is that the marginal gains to happiness are pretty low if you look at annual income. I don't think these income and happiness studies are the best. They overly focus on one factor when life is complicated. And if you're in this course, you're probably already thinking that way. And you've probably seen these and you've started thinking a little bit deeper about your relationship with money. I still think they're worth showing, mostly because it's pretty surprising how quickly the marginal gains to income level out. So when I was employed full-time, I had a very simple relationship with money. You get the monthly income and then you figure out how to spend it. Let's explore how I grappled with that as I took the leap to self-employment and how it changed my relationship to money. I want to share my own personal income and spending journey as I took the leap to self-employment. And this is my spending in 2016 and 17 when I was making good money living in New York. And I looked back, I never did a budget until I became self-employed and was asking myself, where did all that money go? So I started analyzing my spending and I found some surprising things. Spending a lot of money on food and drink, travel, trips, convenience, and wasn't really sure that I even valued these things. How does this happen? A lot of you have probably heard of lifestyle creep. The scientific term for this is called the hedonic treadmill. It's essentially when we have that crappy car and we're convinced we want that nicer car. Why this happens, what researchers have found is that when you have more money, it correlates with an increase in desires and an increase in expectations. Here's a tweet from somebody saying that they didn't want to buy something, but the logic in our culture is that we deserve these things. We should be buying things. We should always get better things. To self-employment, I quickly realized that everything I spend money on meant I would have to work more. Because I was working as a freelancer when I first started, it turned into a very easy calculation that I could figure out. And it made me really reassess, what do I actually want to be spending my money on? Now, after going through this exercise, the first part, you can see I was living in Boston and was able to dramatically cut my cost of living, and even more so in the last year. Let's walk through an exercise to see what this looks like. Let's say you have monthly rent of $1,500. This turns into $18,000 a year, and then factoring in a tax rate, it means you need to earn $24,000 a year. Now let's say you're open to having a roommate and lowering your rent. This means your target income, you're going to have to earn $8,000 less dollars. Now the next step is really to calculate what that means in terms of the work you're doing as a self-employed professional, solopreneur, freelancer, whatever you're doing. If you're making $75 an hour, this might mean 2 extra billable hours per week or 107 hours per year, which can be a lot. We have a hard time making this trade-off and calculation in our head. Research done by 3 people in 2016 found that even though we are aware that more time might be something we want, when given the choice between time and money, we end up choosing money. Here's a solopreneur on shifting away from full-time work to working on her own. And she calls out some unexpected feelings she had. You're more relaxed. You realize you didn't need so much in the first place. You learn how to make do with less. And most importantly, you're way more creative and inventive with your work and funds. Here's author Ryan Holiday on deciding to only work a few hours per day. He says he's able to do this because he's not focused on becoming rich, powerful, or important, and he's found his own creative engine to do work where he can at least support himself and keep going. He says there are plenty of billionaires who don't have this, and plenty of ordinary people who have never lost it. Earlier in the course, we went into the history of work and some of the beliefs that shape our modern reality of work and our ideas of how much one should work and how one should work. However, if we're taking a leap beyond the default path, it seems a little bit crazy to just adopt the practices of the full-time working world, 5 days a week, 40 hours a week. So if we are going to carve our own path, why not think of it in terms of a full life perspective and try to figure out, if it was up to us, how much would we want to work and how would we design our lives around that? Some of you may be thinking, what if I want to make money? I think that's totally fine, and some people are very motivated by money. However, if we make money central, it is risky. Research on 18-year-olds showed that if they chose money as a very important driver of their goals in the future, it was a good predictor of their future life satisfaction in both directions. People who wanted money and got it were more satisfied than average, except those that wanted money and didn't get it were significantly more dissatisfied. In 2008, after the global financial crisis, many banks took money from the government, which meant that the government had control over what their CEOs were going to get paid in bonuses that year. Kenneth Feinberg was assigned to determine the pay of these CEOs, and what he found was pretty shocking. Listen to this clip and see how these CEOs attach their income to their self-worth.
So this was my job for 16 months, to set individual corporate packages of compensation for the top 25 officials in the 7 companies that receive the most taxpayer bailout assistance.
Yeah, and what kind of blowback did you get from them?
Tremendous blowback. I did not realize how emotional this would get. Corporate officials, if I go to them and say, you are making $5 million a year, now I'm going to cut it back to $1 million. I waited for them to say, oh, that means I'll have to sell a third car. I'll have to get rid of our estate on Long Island at the beach. I won't be able to send my kids to Exeter and Andover. That's what I expected. I was wrong. Very emotional. Because these corporate officials viewed their compensation as the sole barometer of self-worth.
The challenges people have with money are in not being able to define what is enough, not being able to navigate how to manage trade-offs between time and money. And as we saw with the CEOs in the previous clip, how does it link to our idea of self-worth? One way to grapple with this is to start to figure out why you make money and how it relates to what brings you joy. Many of us make very arbitrary money decisions. We decide that certain things can be spent on, whereas others cannot. Like going out to dinner, $50 on a nice meal is okay. But when Apple hits you with 99 cents for an app, suddenly you freak out. A way to overcome this is to start thinking about your money in terms of buckets and the joy you get out of it. Rent and eating out may not give you that much joy. However, you may have a lot of joy that you get from giving people gifts. What if you can up what you give to other people from $50 to $100 every month? How could that impact your life? This is Kei He. He left Wall Street at 35 years old, with no certain path of his future, but he knew that he wanted to design his life around spending more time with his kids and family. Let's listen to a short clip of him on this podcast describing what this meant for him.
Very close to a lot of those things, not because I have this amount of money, but because most of them are more preconditioned on me having time and flexibility. I want to have the flexibility in my life to allow me to be the creator and parent and spouse that I want to be.
Cool.
That's like very, very, very important to me. I have designed it into my life that I get to spend, 3 to 4 hours with my kids every day. I don't want to be thinking I need to check my phone.
Later in the episode, he talks about the trade-off with time. And he says he's willing to give up a lot of the upside of his business to preserve that in the short term. A reflection question he offers people in his own work, and I'll link up some of the stuff he's written, which is pretty awesome, are what are the 10 reasons you make money? A lot of times people can come up with very easy ones for the first 3 or 4, but the next 6 or 7 are a little harder. It's hard to figure out why you actually want to make the money.